about sports and COVID here because it's been a microcosm, something of a lab from the beginning of this pandemic. And now you've taken a really close look at the NFL to try to learn from how they handled COVID for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I followed them all along from the very beginning when they were thinking, can we actually begin our season? This is back in 2020. But keep in mind, as you said, John, a microcosm. They had lots of testing. They had lots of measures. So in some way, you get an idea of what all these measures that we've been talking about would look like in a very small community. And here's what we found.
The NFL is postponing 3 games due to COVID-19 issues around the league.
Just like the rest of the country, Omicron hit the NFL hard.
Things that we had thought that we really understood all of a sudden turned upside down overnight.
Throughout the pandemic, I've been checking in with NFL Chief Medical Officer Dr. Alan Sills. I wanted to understand how the league is riding the waves of this virus. I think last time we spoke, you talked about the most common scenarios for the virus to transmit were eating, meeting, greeting. Same with Omicron, or did that change things?
I think what was different with Omicron is just so much easier to transmit. One of my colleagues from infectious disease described Omicron as almost like a fog that just settled over everybody.
As Omicron swept across the country, the NFL says it saw average cases jump from below 30 a week to more than 300. Now, there is one place that Dr. Sills says COVID transmission remains very unlikely, and that's here out on the field. Now, before Omicron, the NFL did not document a single case of COVID actually crossing the line of scrimmage. Omicron, no doubt, has blurred that picture, but one thing has remained true. Having good ventilation, being outside, is going to be a much safer environment. Indoors, the league has continued to require masks and implement physical distancing. But when it comes to testing, they shifted to a more controversial strategy.
We adjusted our testing and said, you know what, rather than just randomly sampling people at certain preset time intervals, we're going to hone in on symptomatic testing because we think that's where we're going to identify the cases that we're concerned about. One of the unusual things about this virus, Doc, is that it does seem to transmit even among people who don't have symptoms. How does it address that potential spread? Let's just say we were testing someone on a Monday. They test Monday, they test negative, and then on Wednesday they start to have some symptoms, and they think, well, it must not be COVID because tested negative, you know? So there was really, I think, almost a disincentive to maybe come forward as soon as you were symptomatic. So I think it allowed us to quickly identify cases, which is what we wanted to do. So far, Sills says it has worked, but knows these protocols are reinforced by one key thing. Being heavily vaccinated was an important part of how we were able to successfully get through the season. While about 2/3 of the country is vaccinated, the NFL says it has a vaccination rate of 95% among its players and nearly 100% for its coaches and staff. The league has only seen 1 hospitalization from COVID this entire season. But since vaccines and boosters are only mandatory for staff, not players, there have been some high-profile cases.
Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers is now owning up to the fact that he's not vaccinated for COVID.
The story that got the most attention was Aaron Rodgers. How does that happen?
I'll just say that, I think that obviously there's a lot of interest about this issue of how the vaccinated and unvaccinated fared. And in our data, as I said, it's very clear. Those who were vaccinated were more protected.
But now is the NFL study the role of natural immunity, that is immunity from a previous infection.
I think one of the challenges about natural immunity is it's really variable. I think it's a fallacy to say, well, I had COVID, I must be immune for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. I think biology is not that convenient. With vaccines, you can say, I know what happens after vaccination. I know it establishes this amount of immunity.
Sills says the league will continue to follow the data when it comes to protocols, but leading up to the Super Bowl, he feels confident the country can learn from the NFL how to better navigate this virus going forward.
We get into this very binary thinking that it's shut everything down or act like nothing's going on, and there is truly a middle ground to be had. I think that's important. They are collecting so much data. Dr. Sills told me they're also sharing that data now with the CDC, again, because they're a very confined community and easy to sort of study this way. But also, it may provide us not just a microcosm, but also a harbinger or a sort of predictor of what's likely to happen in the country. So, and that looks good. I mean, what's happening with the NFL, the cases been coming down dramatically, as we've been seeing in the country.
because they have a higher vaccination rate, it may be happening more quickly, but ultimately you should see similar trajectories in the country overall. That has been true sort of throughout the last couple of years with the NFL, again, sort of being a forerunner to what's happening in the rest of the country.
It's really revealing when you look at all that data there and what they've learned and to extrapolate that out to what it might mean for the rest of us. Sanjay, thank you so much for that.